Amos wanted us to look at the US dollar ZAR currency pair. Now, we know with the news of Moody's, etc., that there was massive volatility, the rand weakened, but not with, just in a couple of days strengthened again. But what was interesting for me that we can maybe highlight to our viewers is that on a candle graph, there's a clear rising wedge formation, which implies that if the rand starts to consolidate below 14.54 on a weekly close, we can see a lot stronger levels, even back to 13.89, which I know almost sounds impossible at the moment. But take note that this possible lower high, as well as the lower band of my rising wedge, as well as my 40-week moving average, almost all come together at one place. And that is very important in technical analysis because it tells me that if the buyers of the rand in this case are strong enough to take this rand to stronger levels, we can see it a lot lower than expected. So it is critical levels there around 14.54, the 40-week moving average, it's waiting at 14.50. So if these levels start to change into resistance, we can expect a lot stronger rand. But what I want to highlight for you, Amos, is that when I change this same graph into a weekly graph, my picture looks the same, yes, but what happens is I'll have to pull this line back. And what happens is this becomes an ascending triangle, which means that it is ascending triangle normally means it is a pause in a pattern that maybe in this case can take the rand a lot weaker. But the other downside to that is this trend line that I've drawn in there only has two touching points, which means it's a temporarily trend line. It's not really a strong line. But having said that, it also implies that when that level around 15 Rand 28 changes into a support, we can see the Rand back at 15.72 and 16.12 if the formation continues. But we also can see on a line graph that there are definitely lower highs visible. That support there at 15 Rand 12 is lower than the support there was at around 15.28. And even this week, that resistance at 15 is lower than that previous resistance at around 15 Rand 12. So if the rand can continue to find enough buyers, we can see a stronger rand. And those levels there around 14.55, 14.50 are critical levels that either needs to remain a support if you want a weaker rand. But if those level changes into resistance, we maybe can see the rand back at around 13.91. So critical levels that you can take note of for what it's worth, because sometimes news can take the rand in a direction that is highly unexpected. TM wanted us to look at Jubilee. And we know that the platinum price is still continuing to rise. But Jubilee, and I've drawn in Fibonacci levels here too, which is just a tool that can be used to identify support or resistance levels. Now, Jubilee has had a massive rally. That red line supported the long-term sentiment, which supported the fuel and the price to reach for higher levels. But that 86 cents looks like it's changing into a resistance. Remember, this weekly graph, this candle, will only be finished on a Friday close. So when this share continues to keep 86 cents a resistance, we can assume that the next support that will be tested is 76 cents. But we know that sometimes traders just take profit and the buyers start to support the stock again and lift it to higher levels. So the critical support that you need to keep in mind there, TM, is 76 cents as a support, and that resistance that are now being tested is 86 cents. Where can Jubilee go? Strong resistance is 92 cents. 1 Rand, and then 1 Rand 61, even higher, which is the 115% level on my Fibonacci levels. But maybe it can do what it's done here in that week there in April, May, and June 2019, where Jubilee made a little bit of a pullback, tested the 40-week moving average, could find enough buyers to lift it again. So let's see when the traders take profit, what my pullback will look like, maybe again 76 cents or even that level there around 68 cents, and then find enough buyers to lift it. But as long as we have a weaker rand or even a stronger platinum price, we would assume that Jubilee will continue to reach for higher levels. Rashad wanted us to look at Intu properties. Now, at some stage, we were so optimistic because Intu was testing these strong critical levels there around 8 Rand 50, and that trend line, that diagonal trend line that I've drawn there at 8 Rand 87. And that trend line is critical. Why? Because that trend line on Intu properties has kept the momentum to the bottom in place since March 2019. But in the week there of the 14th of October, 21st, and the 28th of October, the buyers and the sellers tested those levels. But again, this week, the buyers were just not strong enough to keep those levels of support, and the stock was sold off. Now, a lot of them will say, oh, it's negative, it's now doom and gloom. But take note there that even that small little lower shadow on the candle tells me that the low of the stock this week was 6 Rand 15, but there were buyers there that started to nibble on the share. So you'll say, Christelle, what's the point? The point is those levels are very close to these support levels here in the week of the 19th of August 26th and the 2nd of September. So if the share can continue to find buyers at these levels and start to reach for higher levels again, maybe we can have a possible double bottom here. And we know that double bottoms, triple bottoms, and inverse head and shoulder formations are all possible turnaround patterns. Yes, we are very far from our red line. We are very far from our 40-week moving average. But let's see if that 6 Rand 18 can continue to remain a support. If the sellers are stronger than the buyers and they start to sell the stock of lower to 6 Rand 18, the optimism, the possible optimism of that formation will be wiped off the table, and we would assume that the momentum to the top or to the momentum to the bottom will continue. And if we zoom out, you can see the stock are on all-time lows. I mean, if I just zoom back, it's at record lows at the moment. But as some of the analysts might say, the property is still there. So maybe if you want to look at possible sectors that might turn around for the future, maybe you can start to nibble when this possible double bottom becomes a reality. But I'm running ahead of myself because 6 Rand 18 needs to change and keep a support on a weekly graph. And this candle is not finished yet because this is a weekly graph. Jean wanted us to look at Westcoal, also listed on our JSE. But Jean, this graph has got a lot of dragonfly, doji, gravestone doji candles. What is a gravestone doji candle? It's a candle with a long upper shadow, almost no real body. And the real body is that line at the very bottom of the candle. That tells me that the sellers are serious and that they're selling this stock off every time that resistance there at around 1 Rand 40 gets reached. The sellers sell it off to lower levels. Now, a gravestone doji candle is a negative candle. It tells me that the sellers are stronger. But this is a dragonfly candle with a long lower shadow, and a dragonfly normally is the one that early in the morning goes and picks up the nectar and flies away. So that is a positive candle. So I've got a contradicting picture here. Yes, my rising channel previously played out completely. I've got a positive dragonfly candle and two negative candles. So 1 Rand 50 needs to change into a support, and the stock needs to keep 1 Rand 40 as support in order for me to see whether it can at least change the 40-week moving average into a support. And that is waiting at 1 Rand 44. So if 1 Rand 40 can change into a support, that possible negativity gets wiped off the table. The next big test is at 1 Rand 44. And then the big test is, can the stock keep 1 Rand 44 as support? Now, we think that we only get tested in our lives. Trust me, shares get tested on a daily basis as well to see if they are strong enough to continue to rise for higher levels. Now, have a look here. In that week there of the 2nd of September and the 9th of September, the stock changed the 40-week moving average, which is that red line, Westcoal. It changed it into a support. It could not find enough buyers to keep it above it, and there was that massive sell-off that took the share as low as 1 Rand and 7 cents. So 1 Rand 40, 1 Rand 44, those are critical levels, and then maybe that big resistance waiting there around 1 Rand 66 needs to change into a support in order for us to believe that Westcoal can maybe reach for higher levels. Now, if I zoom out, we can see that there is strong resistance even higher at 1 Rand 70. But again, if I change that into a line graph, my picture looks a little bit different. So again, that R1.40 level needs to change into a support, and then maybe I can have a very small double bottom there at the bottom of Westcol. My stochastic is in no man's land. It's sitting on a 33, not enough to get me excited yet. So at the moment, Jean, I would wait for R1.40 to change into a support, which will be for me a possible confirmation, because remember, nothing is guaranteed that this Westcol might be a turnaround story. Kraft Heinz was one of the shares that Stephen asked us to have a look at. And Stephen, you won't know it, but Kraft Heinz is one of my favorite shares that I've been eyeing for a while on the US market that I think might be a turnaround story. Because for a long time, it just consolidated sideways. And if I look back, just see the last time the 40-week moving average, that red line on Kraft Heinz changed into a support or remained a support that was not even a support. It was in the week of the 12th of June 2017. But take a look what happened last week. It was the first time since in June 2017 that Kraft Heinz changed that 40-week moving average into a support. And that is very positive. So now the big test is, can it remain a support? And we can see this week, Kraft is testing that critical level at around $33.24. It's testing it to see if it can find enough buyers to lift it. And yes, that higher low was confirmed around $29.63, where the share pulled back, found support, bounced. Found resistance again, found support. That support was a little bit higher than the previous support there at $24.64. And again, broke through that resistance there at $29.67 and rose to higher levels. So now the big test is to see whether it can change that resistance that has been in place since the week of the 25th of February 2019 and see if it can change it into a support. Now, this tomato sauce and macaroni and cheese share might not mean a lot to some of you, but this technical graph is telling me that there is buying interest, that the long-term sentiment towards the stock has changed into positive for the first time in 2 years and 3 months. So let's see if Kraft Heinz can continue to find buying interest to lift it to higher levels. Please feel free to send us emails or follow us on Twitter with your requests for next week's show. Have a fabulous week. Cheers.